She didn't even bother to call. Just a message. 5 words, cutting clean through me like shattered glass. Please don't come. It's better. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at my phone as if it were something poisonous, something that could burn right through my hand. Behind me, the kettle screamed on the stove, high, insistent, but I couldn't move. My daughter Emily was getting married in just 2 weeks. And somehow with that short text, she'd told me I wasn't invited. The message came at 7:08 in the morning, right after I'd rinsed the last of the breakfast dishes. The sunlight through the window felt colder than usual, and for the first time in years, the house sounded too quiet. I was about to sit down and make a grocery list when it buzzed. That cold little rectangle lit up with her name and those words, "Please don't come, it's better." For whom? Not for me. I sat down slowly at the table, the chair creaking under me. 77 years old, widow, antique shop owner, mother of 1, and now apparently not even that. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat. I looked at the lace dolly Emily had made when she was 10. It was under the sugar bowl, faded and fraying. But I never replaced it. I looked at the tiny chip on the teacup she once dropped and swore she'd glue back. I looked at everything that still held her, even if she wanted nothing to do with me now. Later that morning, I tried to talk myself out of the hurt. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe Paul had sent it, her fiancé. But the number was hers in the way she wrote it. No greeting, no punctuation, no explanation. I told myself I should call her, ask, but then what beg? The next day I opened my closet and took out the navy blue dress I'd bought for the wedding. It still had the tag. I'd splurged on it. The fabric was soft, dignified, the neckline just right. I'd even bought a brooch. It still sat in the little velvet box. I tried it on. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair was silver now, not gray, silver, thick, and twisted into a neat bun. Her back was still straight, her eyes still clear, but she looked smaller, like someone who'd been stepping out of the way too long. I took the dress off and hung it carefully back on the hanger. I smoothed the sleeves. I didn't cry. The next week crawled by. My neighbor Sylvia came over for tea and told me she'd gotten an invitation in the mail, not to the ceremony, but to the reception. She was beaming. "It's at that new hall in Hawthorne, the one with the chandeliers. Emily's really moving up in the world, huh?" I smiled and nodded. I didn't tell her I'd been asked not to come. I didn't tell anyone. 2 days before the wedding, I went to the market and ran into a woman I barely recognized. Elegant, sharp cheekbones, thick white hair and a French twist. She was looking at linen napkins, holding one up to the light. "You're Nora, right?" she said, eyes narrowing. I nodded, polite. "Yes, I'm Lynn, Paul's mother." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then it hit me. This was the groom's mother, my daughter's future mother-in-law. She smiled, faint and reserved. "Funny, we haven't met. You'd think with a wedding coming up, we'd have had a family dinner by now." I blinked. "Yes, you would." She lowered the napkin. "Well, I suppose that's modern life for you." We ended up sitting on the bench outside the shop, paper cups of tea in hand. It wasn't planned. She just said, "You have time for a cup," and I did. "I didn't raise Paul to be flashy," she said. "But this whole wedding, I barely recognize any of it. I feel like I'm watching strangers make decisions I'm supposed to smile through." I said nothing. Then she looked at me. "Are you going?" I hesitated, and for the first time I told someone the truth. "No, I've been asked not to." Lynn blinked slowly. "You're her mother." I know. She didn't say anything right away. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You should come as my guest." I turned to her. "Lynn, I mean it. She may be your daughter, but he's my son, and neither of us should be sitting this one out." I didn't answer. I didn't say yes, but I also didn't say no. When I got home that night, I took the dress out again. I laid it on the bed. Then I opened the brooch box. The stones caught the light, quiet and steady. I didn't know if I'd go. Not really. But I left the dress hanging on the door. I didn't sleep that night. The dress kept catching my eye through the open bedroom door. A shadow in navy blue, like someone standing and waiting. At one point, I got up, walked over, and touched the fabric. It felt cool under my fingers, expensive, like something meant for someone else's life, not mine. By morning, I'd convinced myself not to go. What kind of mother shows up to her daughter's wedding uninvited? What kind of woman barges in just to prove a point? A bitter one. A pathetic one. That's what I told myself. I brewed a pot of tea, fed the cat, read the news online like it was any other Thursday. Outside, the leaves were starting to turn. Autumn always made the air feel honest. No perfume, no disguise, just the quiet shift of everything dying a little before it could grow again. Around noon, the doorbell rang. It was Lynn. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. She held a paper bag from a bakery downtown. "I brought scones," she said simply, "with lemon curd." I stepped aside. "You didn't have to." I know. She set the bag on the counter. But I wanted to. We sat at the kitchen table. Two women in our 70s eating scones like schoolgirls hiding from something. There was no music, no television, just the clink of teaspoons against porcelain. She looked around. Your home's peaceful. That's one word for it. She smiled slightly. I've been thinking about your daughter. That made my throat tighten. What about her? She's sharp, controlled, very polished. Paul says she organizes her life down to the minute. I suppose that's impressive, but it doesn't leave much room for people who don't fit her design. I stared at the window. She used to bring me dandelions from the yard when she was 5. Lynn didn't say anything. She'd call them sun wishes. I laughed quietly. She thought if you blew the fluff into the wind, something good would happen. There was silence between us again. Not heavy, just the kind that comes when neither of you has anything to prove. She didn't invite me either, Lynn said after a moment. I turned to her. What? I got an email, she said, wiping crumbs from her fingers. From her, not Paul. She said the guest list was tight and that some extended family wouldn't be able to attend, but I'm not extended. I'm his mother. A flicker of heat passed through me. She's erasing us both. Lynn folded her napkin carefully. I think she wants the illusion of perfect beginnings. No loose threads. She sees me as a loose thread, I said softly. Something frayed and old-fashioned. She looked me straight in the eyes. You're a foundation stone. She just doesn't know it. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet realization that I had been waiting far too long for someone to give me permission to exist. Do you want to go? Lynn asked. To the wedding. Yes, with me. I stared at her. She wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't making a gesture. She was simply offering presence. I thought of Emily's message, please don't come, and I thought of the girl with sun wishes in her hand. I don't know. That's fair, Lynn said, getting up. But I'll be here at noon on Saturday wearing navy blue if that helps. She left before I could respond. That night, I didn't take the dress off the door. I didn't pack it away. I didn't even touch it, but I did polish the brooch just in case. The next day passed quietly. I didn't go to the shop. I didn't call anyone. I didn't try on the dress again. But I did take out the small black purse I hadn't used in years and checked that the clasp still worked. By evening the air had turned colder. I wrapped myself in a shawl and sat on the back porch looking at the garden. It had overgrown this summer. The marigolds were too tall. The tomatoes had collapsed under their own weight. It looked a little wild, a little messy, like it had lived its own way. I smiled. The phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a message from Sylvia. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'll save you a seat at our table. I stared at the text. Sylvia had been invited and I hadn't. I typed out a polite reply, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, plans changed. See you there. I didn't wait for her reply. I turned off the phone. Saturday morning I rose at 7. I took a long shower, washed my hair, put on my lotion, took my time with makeup, light powder, a bit of color on the lips, just enough. I laid the dress on the bed, looked at it for a long moment, then slowly I put it on. It fit perfectly. At noon sharp, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Lynn stood there in her own navy dress, pearl earrings, silver clutch in hand. Her expression was calm, assured. You're radiant, she said simply. So are you, I replied. And then we walked out together. The wedding was at the Hawthorne Glass House, one of those new venues with Florida, ceiling windows, and polished stone floors that looked too clean to walk on. It sat on the edge of a private vineyard just outside of Portland, hidden behind white fences and trimmed hedges like some secret society. Lynn had arranged for a car, black, discreet, with a driver in a clean gray suit. I offered to split the fare. She refused. Let me do this, she said. It's my small act of rebellion. The ride was quiet, not tense, just thoughtful. She sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. I held my purse a little too tight. You don't have to speak, she said as we pulled into the long circular drive. You don't have to explain. You don't even have to smile. You're here because you belong. I nodded. So do you. We stepped out into bright October light. The sun was unseasonably warm. Around us, guests mingled near the entrance in muted pastels and rented tuxedos. Everyone looked like they were auditioning for a magazine spread. It smelled like champagne and rose water. No one noticed us at first, but then someone did. A man I vaguely recognized, one of Emily's college friends, maybe glanced up, blinked, and turned to the woman beside him, whispering. Her eyes followed his, landed on us, and widened just enough to confirm it. We weren't supposed to be here. I felt a rush of blood in my ears, but Lynn's voice steadied me. Look ahead, she said softly. Chin up, shoulders back. We entered the main hall. It was stunning, vated ceilings, hanging gardens suspended above the guests, a string quartet, playing something modern and moody. The tables were arranged in perfect circles, white linens and crystal glassware catching the light like prisms. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus. The ceremony had already ended. This was the cocktail hour before the dinner. People were scattered laughing, taking photos, sipping drinks. And then I saw her, Emily. She stood near the fountain at the far end of the room, one hand on a champagne flute, the other resting lightly on Paul's arm. She wore a sleeveless silk gown that shimmered like water. Her hair was pinned into some complicated knot. She looked beautiful. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. She laughed at something Paul said. He leaned closer. Then she turned slightly and saw me. Our eyes locked. It was like time stopped. Her smile faltered. Not a lot, just a flicker. But I saw it. Then she turned to Paul, said something quickly. He looked over too, eyebrows raised. His mother stood beside me, perfectly still. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a scene, maybe her storming over or pretending not to see me. What I didn't expect, what I'll never forget, was how she walked toward us like it was nothing, like she was just greeting another guest. Like this wasn't an earthquake rolling under her satin heels. "Mother," she said calmly, stopping in front of me. "I thought you got my message." Her voice was soft, private, polite, cutting. "I did," I said just as softly. "I read it, and I decided not to follow it." She stared at me for a long second, then shifted her gaze to Lynn. "I wasn't expecting either of you." Lynn raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "It's good to be surprising at our age." Emily's jaw tightened. "This is not the time." "No," I agreed, "but it's the place, and I'm here behind her." Paul approached. "Mom," he said, nodding at Lynn. Then his eyes fell on me. "And Mrs. Welton." "Hello, Paul," I said just as politely. "Congratulations." He looked slightly stunned. "Thank you. We didn't know you were coming." "I know." Emily placed a hand on his chest. "Can we talk privately?" I stepped back. "If you'd like, but I'm not leaving, Emily. Not unless you ask the staff to escort me out. And even then it'll be a scene." Her cheeks colored, not with embarrassment, with control slipping through her fingers. Paul looked between us. "Let's all just take a breath." Lynn spoke then gently. "Emily, I want to be clear. Nora is not crashing this event. I invited her as my guest, and I believe she has every right to be here." Emily's mouth opened, then closed. She nodded once tightly. "Enjoy the evening." She turned and walked away, Paul following half a step behind. My knees felt unsteady, but I didn't show it. Lynn touched my arm. "Well done." "I don't feel done," I muttered. We found a quiet table near the back of the hall. The music swelled. Waiters passed with silver trays of canapes I couldn't pronounce. The room buzzed with polite chatter and clinking glasses. But there was a current, now a ripple. People noticed us, not in a rude way, just curious, measuring. Sylvia appeared suddenly, blinking in surprise. "Nora, I thought I didn't think plans changed," I said, smiling. She didn't know what to say, so I said it for her. "I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm just here to remember who I am." And with that, I reached for a glass of water, took a slow sip, and settled in. Let them talk, let them wonder, let my daughter stew. I wasn't here to cause trouble. I was here to be seen. Emily didn't come near us for the rest of the evening, not even a glance in our direction. But the tension clung to the air like smoke, not visible but sharp in the nose. Around us, the celebration churned on. Photos were taken, appetizers replaced with salads, and at some point the first course arrived with choreographed waiters in starched vests. Everything was seamless, flawless, exactly the way Emily liked it. And yet she wasn't smiling anymore. Lynn and I sat at a table tucked near the side wall, close enough to be in the room, but far enough to be considered an afterthought. No name cards waited for us, no seats saved. But we found our own. The guests at our table, a younger couple from Paul's office and an older aunt on his side, were polite but visibly confused by our presence. I could almost hear their questions carefully kept behind polite smiles. Weren't these women supposed to be elsewhere? "Do you think she'll try to have us removed?" I asked Lynn under my breath. "She'd already have done it," she replied calmly, spreading butter on her roll. "She knows that would make more of a scene than our presence ever could." She took a delicate bite and chewed slowly. I wanted to laugh. I didn't, but I wanted to. "You're oddly good at this," I said. She smiled slightly. "I've had practice." The truth was, Lynn didn't seem flustered by any of it. She carried herself like a woman who had long ago stopped begging for permission. It wasn't arrogance. It was survival, and I was starting to understand that. Across the room, I saw my daughter flit between tables like a polished ghost. Her dress shimmered under the chandeliers, and her expression was tightly composed. She greeted guests, accepted compliments, made toasts with perfect posture, but there was a rigidity in her movements that hadn't been there earlier. She was aware of me. That alone was something. Between courses, Paul's younger stepsister came over, a girl named Rachel with dark curls and a hesitant smile. She leaned close to Lynn first. "I'm really glad you came," she said quietly. "It didn't feel right without you." Lynn nodded, her expression softening. Thank you, sweetheart. Then Rachel turned to me. And you too, Mrs. Welton. I didn't know. Well, I didn't know. You weren't supposed to, I replied. She looked down. Emily's kind of intense. I mean, I like her, but she scares me a little. She scares a lot of people, I said gently. But she didn't always. Rachel smiled awkwardly, then excused herself. I watched her disappear into the crowd. The music shifted into something more upbeat, strings blending into jazz. A few couples began to dance on the open floor. I saw Emily and Paul take to the center for a slow number, choreographed and graceful. Did you take dance lessons before your wedding? I asked Lynn. She shook her head. No, Paul's father and I mostly stumbled around the kitchen to Frank Sinatra. Same here, I said smiling. My late husband Thomas had 2 left feet, but could hum every tune in key. For a moment we sat there, 2 women in navy, sipping sparkling water, surrounded by a celebration that wasn't made for us. And yet, here we were, still upright, still present. Halfway through the dancing, I noticed a teenager circling the edges of the room, tall and lanky, with thick, dark eyebrows and a nervous energy. He carried a camera, the kind real photographers use, not just a phone, and seemed unsure where to aim it. I caught his eye. He blinked, then walked over. Hi, I'm Tyler, he said. I'm the assistant photographer. Hello, Tyler. I was told to get candid shots of family members. I raised an eyebrow. Then you've come to the right place. He looked nervous. I wasn't sure if they didn't give me a full list. That's all right, I said kindly. You can take one if you'd like. He hesitated, then lifted the camera. I adjusted my posture, smoothed the fabric at my waist. Lynn turned slightly toward me. He snapped the photo. Thank you, he said, and then with a strange sincerity added. You both look very strong. We smiled. It was a small thing, but something about it made my throat tighten. Later, the main course came and went. Wine flowed more freely. Speeches began. First, Paul thanking everyone for coming. Then the best man with the usual mix of jokes and nostalgia. Then Emily. She stood at the center of the room holding the mic like a politician. Her voice was clear, rehearsed, perfectly modulated. I want to thank you all for being here today, she said on the most important day of my life. She made eye contact with table after table, but not ours. I've always believed in intention, she continued, in planning and designing a life that reflects who we are. And everyone here, you are part of that design. A pause. The room waited. I believe in moving forward, in choosing the people who walk beside you, and I'm grateful for those who stood by me, especially when it wasn't convenient, especially when it was hard. The words stung, not because they were loud, but because they were aimed like darts wrapped in silk. She smiled, thanked the vendors, the staff, her in-laws, Paul's entire family, so generous, so kind, and ended with a toast to beginnings. Everyone clinked glasses except me. I looked down at the condensation on my glass, the quiet beads of water trailing toward the linen. I didn't say a word, but I didn't leave either. Lynn leaned in. She thought that speech would end you, she murmured. She doesn't understand what I've survived, I whispered back. The next song started something soft and jazzy, and I realized I wasn't going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever again without deciding for myself. If I was a ghost in her world, then I'd be the kind that didn't fade. The kind that made people remember. It was the girl in the green velvet dress who brought the shift. She couldn't have been more than 16, pale skin, auburn hair that looked like it had never taken a curling iron in its life, and a necklace far too mature for her age. One of those thin gold chains with a single pearl that made you think she borrowed it from her mother's jewelry box. She had been watching me from across the room for some time, not staring, just observing. She wasn't sipping champagne like the others or whispering behind manicured hands. She stood quietly near the cake table, a plate of untouched cheesecake in one hand, her eyes trained on me with a look I couldn't quite place. Eventually, she walked over. "Excuse me," she said, soft but clear. "Are you Emily's mother?" I blinked. "Yes." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I'm Clara, Paul's stepniece. My mom married his uncle," I nodded. "Nice to meet you, Clara." She glanced over her shoulder. "I saw the way she looked at you at the ceremony. She didn't look happy you were here." I didn't answer. Clara took a small breath. "I think you look amazing." I blinked again. "Thank you." "No, I mean really. You look like someone who should be here, like someone important." "I don't understand why she's mad. You're her mom." The bluntness of it hit me harder than Emily's whole speech. "She has her reasons," I said carefully. Clara frowned. "They're bad reasons." That made me smile just a little. She looked down at her plate. "I don't think I'll have the cheesecake. I just took it because everyone else did." "Do you want it?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, but thank you." She nodded, turned to leave, then hesitated. "If my mom told me not to come to her wedding, I think I'd come anyway. Just a reminder I existed." And with that, she walked off. I sat back in my chair, my hand resting gently on the tablecloth, the weight of her words somehow heavier than the wine glass I hadn't touched. Remind her I existed. Was that what this was about? Not revenge, not defiance, just a quiet declaration that I was still here, still whole, still me. Lynn had gone to the restroom, and for a few minutes I sat alone watching my daughter swirl through the room like a wind-up figure in a music box. Every movement smooth, every smile polished, and then she saw Clara. Their conversation was brief, stiff. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Clara gesture toward me and I saw Emily's mouth tighten. Then, and I'll never forget this, Emily looked over directly at me for just a second. No smile, no anger, just acknowledgement, and then she turned away. The band struck up something louder, and the room shifted into a looser rhythm. People moved to the dance floor, chairs emptied, waiters collected glasses with swift, practiced hands, and I remained. Then came the second surprise of the night. Paul approached alone. He didn't look like a man about to confront someone. He looked tired, the kind of tired that goes beyond weddings or stress or too many conversations with distant cousins. He stopped a few feet from our table. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded once. He sat, exhaled slowly, then looked at me. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to you, I didn't know Emily told you not to come." I said nothing. "She said you were traveling, that you'd declined." Still, I didn't speak. He ran a hand through his hair. "I should have checked. I should have called." "Yes," I said finally. "You should have." He looked at the dance floor. "She's always been determined. You probably know that better than anyone. She used to be kind too," I said, "and curious. She used to draw cats on napkins and leave them in my coat pockets. She used to read under the table when guests came over." Paul smiled faintly. "She still does that. Only now it's business plans on her phone." We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm not asking you to leave," he said quietly. "I'm glad you came. That surprised me. I saw Clara talking to you," he continued. "She's not exactly subtle. She reminded me who I was," I said. "Something I forget sometimes." Paul looked at me again. "I don't know what happened between you two, but I hope it isn't permanent." I looked him in the eye. "That's up to her." He nodded. "Fair." He stood, adjusted his cuff links. "If you decide to dance later, Lynn says you used to love swing music." "Still do," I said. He smiled, then walked away. When Lynn returned, she raised an eyebrow. "I leave for 5 minutes and you get courted by the groom. He came to apologize." "That's a start." I reached for my water. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to exist." Lynn raised her glass. "To existing." We clinked softly. The rest of the evening blurred in that strange, slow way that only weddings and funerals do. The music faded into background noise. The lights dimmed just enough. People began to leave in quiet waves, hugging and smiling. Promises to keep in touch. Already starting to dissolve. Emily didn't come back to speak, but Clara did. She hugged me quick, sincere. "I'm really glad you stayed." "Me too. Do you want the last piece of cake?" I laughed. "No, dear. You enjoy it." She grinned. "You're cooler than I thought you'd be." Then she was gone. I looked at Lynn. Maybe there's hope for the next generation. There always is. As we stood to leave, the band began one final song. Slow, sentimental. One of those melodies you recognize without knowing why. I took one last look at the room. No one tried to stop me. No one turned their head. But I knew I'd been seen, and that in the end was enough. The ride home was quieter than the one that brought us there. Lynn sat beside me in the back seat, her purse on her lap, fingers resting lightly on the clasp. She didn't speak, neither did I. The driver made smooth turns through dimly lit roads, headlights slicing through the soft fog that had begun to settle over the vineyard hills. Outside, the world was slipping into late autumn. Trees stood like silhouettes, their leaves already thinned by wind and rain. Street lamps cast golden pools of light on the pavement, steady, rhythmic, like breath. I wasn't tired, but I felt something like it. Not exhaustion of the body, more like the slow uncoiling of a rope pulled too tight for too long. "You did something brave tonight," Lynn said finally. I shook my head. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's story. She turned toward me slightly. "No, you stepped back into your own." We pulled up to my house just after 10:00. The porch light was on. I'd left it out of habit, though I hadn't expected company. Lynn stepped out with me. "Come in," I said, "if you're not too tired." She hesitated, then nodded just for a bit. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust the way it always did. I hung up my shawl. She took off her earrings and placed them in her clutch with a care that made me smile. "I made apple cake yesterday," I said. "It's dry by now, probably, but we can lie to ourselves." "I'm excellent at lying to myself," she replied. "Let's have cake." I cut 2 small slices, poured tea, and brought it to the living room. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. "I envy you a little," I said after a time. "You didn't seem shaken by her." "Not once." Lynn sipped her tea. "Oh, I was shaken. I've just had more practice hiding it. I nodded. You're very good at that. She looked at me. Can I ask you something? Of course. When did you first realize she'd stopped needing you? The question struck deeper than expected. I stared at the teacup. When she got her first job and didn't call for 2 months, not even to say hello. I told myself she was busy, independent. That's what we want for our children, isn't it? But when she did call, it was about a dress. Something she wanted to wear to a work event but couldn't afford. She asked if I could help. I wired her the money that same day. Lynn didn't interrupt. After that, the pattern stayed. Silence, then requests, then silence again. I looked up. The needing never went away. It just changed forms. That's the part no one warns you about, she said. They outgrow your hand but not your wallet. I laughed softly. Yes. We finished our tea. Lynn stood and walked to the window. You have a beautiful garden. It's wild. That's why it's beautiful. She turned, her eyes softer now. I should go. It's late. I walked her to the door. As she stepped outside, she turned back. Don't let her erase you. I won't, I said. Not again. The door closed with a quiet click. I locked it more from habit than necessity. The house felt still. I walked slowly to the mantel and looked at the photographs arranged there. One of Emily in grade school smiling through a missing front tooth. Another of her at 17 on the porch in a graduation cap I'd ironed at midnight the night before. A third us together in the antique store back when it still had chipped wood floors and smelled of lemon oil and old books. I picked that one up. We were both laughing. She was holding a glass paperweight in one hand. I remember the day she'd called it magic trapped in glass. When did that girl vanish? I didn't cry. I simply set the frame back down and turned off the light. I didn't sleep well. My mind kept sifting through the night like fingers through a box of old letters. Emily's voice at the microphone, Clara's small, defiant kindness, Paul's apology, Lynn's steadiness, my own hands clutching the edge of the table during the speech, not in anger, but in something close to mourning. The next morning, I woke with a clarity that didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed, or perhaps earned. I made coffee, fed the cat, pulled the navy dress off its hanger, and laid it on the bed. It still smelled faintly of roses from the wedding hall. Or maybe that was my imagination. I folded it gently and placed it back in the closet, not hidden, just put away. At noon, the doorbell rang. I froze. Not because I was afraid, but because I already knew who it would be. Emily stood on my porch wrapped in a long cream coat, her hair pulled back too tightly, as if even a single loose strand might betray what she was feeling. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. I opened the screen door slowly and stepped outside, folding my arms against the morning chill. We stood like that for several seconds. Two women who shared blood but not warmth, close in distance and galaxies apart. I shouldn't have to ring my own mother's doorbell, she said finally, her voice low, careful. You shouldn't have to tell your own mother not to come to your wedding either, I answered, her jaw tensed. Can I come in? I paused, then stepped aside. Inside the house felt smaller with her in it. Or maybe I just noticed the emptiness more when she was near. I led her to the living room where the tea tray still sat from last night. She didn't sit. I didn't think you'd actually show up, she said, standing near the fireplace like a guest who hadn't decided whether to stay. I know. I told you not to come. You didn't tell me why. Emily inhaled sharply, then let it out slowly. She looked around the room, avoiding my face. Her eyes landed on the photographs. Her expression flickered. I wanted the day to go smoothly, she said. I tilted my head, and that required erasing me. She didn't answer. I gestured to the chair across from mine. Sit. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. She sat carefully, her hands folded in her lap. That old posture, back straight, legs crossed at the ankle. She'd always hated slouching, even as a girl. I didn't want a scene, she said. I didn't want unpredictability. I nodded slowly. And you thought I'd ruin things. I thought you'd remind people of where I came from. There it was, finally. I didn't flinch. You mean this house? I said. This furniture, my plain clothes, my small business, the life I built. She stared at her lap. I gave you everything I could. I continued. I didn't travel. I didn't remarry. I ran a shop and saved for your schooling. I made your lunches until you were 16. I paid for your braces. I co-signed your first lease. I sent you money when you were behind on rent at that first miserable job in New York. I know, she whispered. No, you don't, I said softer. Because if you did, you'd never have sent that message. She looked up finally. Her eyes were glassy but dry. I wanted the day to be about my future, she said. Not my past, I nodded. Then you should have had the courage to tell me that in person. Silence settled between us, heavy, unapologetic. Paul didn't know, she added after a pause. I told him you were traveling. He believed me. Then I imagine he was surprised to see me. So were you? Yes. I leaned back slightly, but you weren't angry. Not really. You were embarrassed. She blinked. I saw your face, Emily. You weren't furious. You were afraid. Afraid I'd embarrass you. That someone might ask what I did for a living, or why I still drive the same car I drove when you were in college. You were afraid I didn't match the image you've worked so hard to curate. That's not it is. She pressed her lips together. I let the quiet hold us for a moment before continuing. I didn't come to the wedding to make a point, I said. I didn't come to ruin anything. I came because I was part of it, whether you like it or not. She nodded slowly. You were poised more than I expected. That almost made me laugh. You expected me to cry, didn't you? I thought you might storm out or give some dramatic speech. You didn't. I didn't have to. I said, I didn't come to be forgiven. I came to remember who I am. Emily looked out the window. I didn't always feel this way. She said it crept in over time. I'd be at work functions and people would ask about my family and I'd hesitate. Not because I was ashamed of you, but because I didn't know how to explain you in a way that fit the world I was trying to move in. You don't need to explain me, I said quietly. You just need to remember that I'm part of the reason you got there. She nodded. I was wrong, she said after a pause, about the message, about everything. I didn't say anything, not out of coldness, out of discipline. Clara said you were kind to her, Emily added. She reminded me of someone, I said. You when you were still soft around the edges. Her eyes welled up then, not a flood, just a slow swell. The kind that stays right on the edge waiting. I want to fix this, she said. I don't know if you can. I can try. I sat still for a long time, then reached over and handed her a napkin from the tray. She took it with a shaky breath. There's nothing to fix, I said. There's only what you do next. We sat like that for several more minutes. No performance, no promises, just two women in a room full of old air and older memories. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. You look beautiful, she said. That dress, that brooch, it wasn't for you, I replied. She nodded. Then she left. I didn't cry, but my tea had gone cold again. I didn't tell anyone she came. Not Lynn, not Sylvia, not the girl at the post office who always asked about Emily, as if she were still 10 years old. Some things lose their shape when repeated, like doff needed too long. Instead, I cleaned, not furiously, not to erase, just steady, quiet movement. Windows washed, linen changed, every shelf in the living room dusted, until the wood gleamed faintly in the afternoon light. I opened every window, even though the air had turned sharp. The house needed to breathe, same as I did. By dusk, I'd found the old shoebox I kept tucked behind a stack of outdated phone books. It was filled with receipts, not for taxes, not for business, for Emily. Every tuition payment, every deposit slip, copies of rent transfers, the orthodontist's invoice from Zo 3, the plane ticket I'd bought her after the breakup with her first fiance. She hadn't asked, but I'd known. I'd always known when to step in quietly, invisibly. The box was heavy, not with paper, with history. I carried it to the kitchen, sat at the table, and looked through it slowly. Each slip a memory. A yes, a quiet, of course, spoken before she even finished asking. 1,000 small ways of saying, I will not let you fall. I wasn't bitter, but I was finished. That night, I called my bank. Good evening, Mrs. Welton. The voice on the other end said, how can I assist you today? I'd like to schedule an appointment, I said. In person, I have some changes I'd like to make, of course, regarding authorizations, I said, and future transfers. There was a pause. Absolutely. We'll set you up for Monday at 10:00. Thank you. I hung up and made myself tea, hot this time, stronger than usual. The next morning, I opened the store late. The antique shop had always been a modest affair, tucked between a florist and a bookstore, the bell over the door louder than necessary, the front window slightly fogged from poor insulation. But it was mine. I ran my hand over the counter, then opened the ledger. I hadn't updated it in days. Around 11, Lynn walked in. She was wearing her usual tailored coat, scarf knotted just so. She held a brown paper bag. Brought lunch, she said, and a question. I smiled. What's the question? She set the bag down, unwrapped 2 sandwiches. What now? I leaned against the counter. What do you mean? You've been seen, she said. You made your point, you stood your ground. What's next? I didn't answer right away. She handed me a sandwich. Egg salad on rye. Always egg salad. I took a bite, chewing slowly. Then I said, I don't think there is a next. Not in the way people think. I'm not looking to rebuild anything. I'm not waiting for reconciliation. I'm not even angry anymore. Lynn nodded. So, what are you looking for? Space, I said. The kind I never gave myself. The kind I always filled with helping, fixing, smoothing. She smiled slightly. You sound dangerous. Maybe I am. We ate in comfortable silence. The kind that doesn't demand performance. After she left, I took out the paperwork drawer from beneath the counter. Inside were all the official documents, the deed to my house, the business license, insurance forms. I added the shoe box to the drawer. It didn't quite fit, but I made room. On impulse, I pulled out a fresh manila folder. On the tab I wrote in pen. For me, I didn't put anything inside it yet, but the label was enough. That afternoon I received a message from Emily. No greeting, just, "Are you free next week for lunch?" Just us. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed, "I'm not sure. Let me get back to you." I hit send and I didn't feel guilt. That night, as I locked up the shop, I looked around the dim room. Glass cases, brass handles, the soft smell of old paper and wood polish. I'd once thought of selling it, of giving the money to Emily for a down payment on a larger apartment, one with a second bathroom, a balcony. She never asked directly. She didn't need to, but I didn't offer. Not this time. And now I never would. That wasn't an act of vengeance. It was an act of release. My name was still on the sign above the door. Gold letters, hand-painted, a little chipped at the edges. I ran my fingers across it as I stepped outside. Nora Welton Antiques. Still here, still mine, still enough. The letter came in a pale blue envelope, hand-dressed in careful script. No return address, no stickers or decoration, just my name, Nora Welton, written like it mattered. I opened it slowly, the way you do when you're not sure what something will carry. Joy, apology, obligation, or all three. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small pressed flower, a daisy perfectly dried, its petals still intact. The note read, "Dear Mrs. Welton, I hope it's okay that I'm writing. I just wanted to say thank you. Not for anything big, just for being there, for showing up, for not apologizing for being you. I watched you that night, and I saw something I didn't know I was missing. I don't have a grandmother. One died when I was a baby. The other stopped calling years ago, but if I could have chosen one, I think I would have picked you. If you ever need help at the store or anything like that, I'd love to come by, even just to dust things or talk. Thank you again for being real. Clara." I reread it 3 times, then set it down carefully beside my cup of tea. The daisy sat between my fingers for a while before I placed it between the pages of an old poetry book on the shelf. I didn't need to mark the page. I'd remember where it was that afternoon. I replied, nothing formal, no signature flourish. Just, "Clara, thank you for writing. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. My door is open. If you want to stop by, bring an extra pair of hands in a clear afternoon. I make strong tea and expect honesty in return. Nora." I mailed it myself, walking to the post office under a sky thick with early November clouds. 2 days later she came. No announcement, no hesitation. Just a quiet knock around 300 in the afternoon. And there she was, green coat, cheeks pink from the cold, and a bag of ginger cookies in one hand. "They're from my mom," she said. "She burned the first batch." "Then I already like her," I said, and let her in. She wandered the shop slowly, like someone moving through a museum with no tour guide. Her fingers hovered above the glass cases but didn't touch. Her eyes lingered on a brass compass, a chipped porcelain doll, a carved wooden box from the early 1900s. "Do you ever get tired of being surrounded by the past?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's not the past if it still speaks." She turned toward me. "Do you think people can be antiques?" "Some try," I said. "But I think we're more like patchwork quilts, old fabric, new stitching." Clara smiled. We spent the afternoon rearranging one of the shelves in the back, the one where I kept odd pieces that never quite sold, a cracked mirror with an iron frame, a jar of marbles, a music box that only played one note. Now she handled each item like it had value, even the broken ones. That mattered. At 5 I made us tea. She took hers with too much honey, but I said nothing. "Emily doesn't talk about you," she said suddenly. I asked once. She just said things were complicated. "They are?" I replied. "Do you want it to change?" I looked at her. This girl with questions that came too fast, too sharp. "I don't want to chase," I said. "Not anymore." She nodded. "I get that. I doubt it." I smiled. "You're 16. "I'm 16 and my mom's on her 3rd husband," she said. "I get more than people think." Touch A. She sipped her tea. "If I were her, I'd be scared too."
"Of what?" she said simply.
"Of someone who doesn't need approval to be real." I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because hearing it from someone so young made me feel older in the best possible way. When she left, she hugged me. Not quick, not performative, just a steady, sincere press of arms around ribs. "You can be my honorary grandma if you want," she said. I laughed. "I'll put it in writing." And I did. The next week I met with my lawyer. I changed the wording of my will. No drama, no punishment, just redirection. Emily's portion remained but smaller now. Fair but not central. The bulk of my personal effects, the store, my house, a small account I'd set aside over the years would go to someone I listed as personal heir by designation, Clara Bennett. When I signed the papers, the lawyer raised an eyebrow. "She's not a relative." "No," I said, "she's something else." He didn't ask further. He didn't need to. I left the office feeling lighter, not because I'd cut Emily out. I hadn't. I still loved her in the way you love people who have shaped you, even when they no longer fit. But I had stopped waiting for her to look back and reach for me. I was reaching forward now towards someone who'd already stepped in without being asked. Someone who dusted broken things and still saw their worth. Someone who with one letter and a daisy had reminded me that I still had something to give and someone to give it to. The first snow came early that year. It wasn't dramatic, just a dusting across the rooftops, the kind that disappears by noon and leaves everything damp and a little brighter, but it was enough to change the sound of the street. Snow muffles the world in a way nothing else can. You don't notice it until you step outside and realize how much quieter things have become. I opened the shop late that morning. Not because I was tired, I wasn't, but because I'd learned not to rush toward things just to fill the silence. The silence was mine now. Clara arrived around 10:00, her boots wet, scarf crooked, cheeks pink. "Do I get a key yet?" she asked, brushing snow from her sleeves. "Not yet," I said, handing her a towel. "Let's see if you survive a full winter first." She grinned. "Is this a test?" "Everything is." She was helping me reorganize the front display, rotating out autumn-themed pieces, polishing the small brass candle holders, setting up the winter postcards in the glass case. She moved with care, not because she was trying to impress me. She'd stopped doing that weeks ago, but because she liked the rhythm of the work. There was comfort in it. And for me, comfort in her. At one point, she paused by the window and said, "You should put a sign out front, something with your face." "My face?" "Yeah," she said. "People like knowing there's a person behind a place. You're not a mystery. You're a draw." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm nearly 80. Exactly. That's branding gold." I laughed. "You're impossible." "I'm right." She probably was. When she left that afternoon, off to her part-time job at the bakery, the one with the terrible hours and even worse playlists, I stayed behind and watched the snow fall again, thinner now, quieter. A man came in just before closing. Middle-aged, plaid scarf, nervous fingers. He walked slowly, looking at each case like it might speak. Eventually he stopped in front of the old typewriter I kept by the counter. A 1949 Smith Corona. Still worked, though the ribbon was dry. "I had one just like this," he said. I nodded. "They're good machines, honest." He ran a hand over the keys. "My mother used to write letters on hers every week to her sister in Wisconsin. People wrote better when they had to mean it." He smiled. "You're not wrong." He didn't buy anything. Just stood there a little longer, then me and left. I didn't mind. Not every visit has to end in a sale. Some are just returns. That night, I sat with the ledger again. Not the financial one. The other. The one I'd started after the wedding. A plain notebook with no title. Just a record of what I gave and what I chose not to. I flipped through pages, paid for Clara's textbooks, declined Emily's third invitation to lunch, still polite, still not ready, donated 3 antique coats to the shelter, said no to a vendor's offer to buy out the store, too early, bought new curtains for the kitchen just because. Each line felt like a boundary drawn or redrawn. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. I wasn't mending anymore. I was designing days that fit my shape now. A shape that no longer curved itself around absence. When I turned out the lights that night, I paused in the hallway, looked again at the framed photograph of me and Emily on her high school graduation day. We were both younger. I still dyed my hair then. She still held my arm in public. I didn't feel pain looking at it. Just distance and the kind of acceptance that comes when you stop asking why and start choosing what now. A few days later, Sylvia dropped by. She brought coffee and a bag of almonds. "You need protein," she said. "You're getting thin." I wasn't, but I took them anyway. She looked around the shop. "That girl Clara, she's in here a lot." "She is. She reminds me of you." "How's that?" "Quiet at first, sharp. But once she settles, you can tell she's watching everything." I smiled. "She sees what matters." Sylvia stirred sugar into her coffee. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gone to the wedding?" "Every day. And I'd still be waiting for what? For someone to come get me." Sylvia nodded. "Glad you didn't wait." So was I. There was something about the way the snow kept falling that week. Soft, persistent, unapologetic. It didn't need permission. It didn't ask to be welcomed. It just landed, stayed, melted when it was done. I think that's how I wanted to be now. Not permanent, not decorative, just real and present and enough. The letter from Emily arrived just before New Year's. Handwritten this time. Not a text, not an email. A real letter folded neatly into pale stationery with her initials embossed in the corner. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The handwriting hadn't changed much, still precise, still slanted, a little smaller now, as if she were trying to take up less space on the page. It read, "Dear Mom, I've been thinking about how strange it is to write you a letter. It feels old-fashioned, but maybe that's the point. I've rewritten this several times. Every version either sounded defensive or too soft, so I'll try to stay in the middle. Just honest. I was wrong. Not just about the wedding, but about the years before that. I confused control for safety. I believed that neatness was the same as peace, that if I could keep the pieces of my life polished and arranged, nothing would slip out from under me. You didn't fit that. You were too steady, too unbothered. I didn't know how to reconcile that with the image I thought I needed. But now I see that you were never a threat. You were a mirror and I wasn't ready to look. I'm not writing to ask for anything, just to say I remember. I remember the paper weights, the bookstore Saturdays, the scent of lemon oil on your hands. I remember your laugh when I told you at age 6 I was going to be a lady boss with shiny shoes. I remember that you let me grow without clipping my wings, even when it left you behind. I see now how much that cost you. I'm sorry. If one day you want to talk, really talk, I'll be here. I'll wait this time. I won't push with love. Emily, I didn't cry when I finished it, but I did hold it in my lap for a long time. The weight of it heavier than the paper could explain. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The next morning, I took down the photo of her graduation and replaced it with a picture Clara had taken of me and Lynn outside the shop. Both of us laughing, wind pulling at our coats, leaves swirling around our feet. I wasn't smiling out of politeness. I was smiling because something had returned, something I thought I'd buried too deep to name. Not joy, not yet, but self. I kept Emily's letter in a drawer, not to reread daily, just to have. Sometimes that's enough. Later that week, I found myself in the back room of the shop, going through a box marked unsold. Inside were pieces I'd long forgotten. A chipped sugar bowl, a wooden bird cage with a broken hinge, a stack of postcards from a cancelled estate sale, and at the bottom a music box. I'd bought it years ago, French, I think. Carved edges. No tune when you opened it, just silence. The cylinder inside had rusted, still I wound it gently, it clicked. Word then stopped. A stubborn thing. I set it aside. Clara came in around 4 that day, pulling off her gloves and tossing them into her coat pocket. Cold enough to make your teeth ache, she said. Hot tea's ready. She poured herself a cup, then spotted the music box on the counter. What's this? Broken. She picked it up, turned it over. Doesn't mean useless. I watched her study it, eyes focused. I like broken things, she said. They have more stories or more warnings. I added. She smiled. Both. We spent the next hour trying to coax a single note out of the thing. At one point, she managed a faint whine, barely more than breath. We both leaned in, listening. She said, "It just forgot how to sing." Something about that stayed with me long after she left. That night, I wrote in my ledger again. Emily wrote, first time in years, didn't cry. Felt more like breathing. Music box still silent, still trying. I paused, pen still in hand, and added, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm walking. The snow had stopped by morning. The air smelled like wood smoke in beginnings. I stepped outside to sweep the walkway, and as I worked, I caught sight of the woman across the street. Newer neighbor, name still escaping me, pulling trash bins to the curb. She waved. I waved back, and just like that, the day started, not with fanfare, but with acknowledgement. I didn't need everything to be healed. I just needed room to live inside my own story again. And now, for the first time in years, I had it. In February, the light changed. Not drastically, just enough that the mornings felt less like endings and more like openings. The shadows thinned. The cold held on, but its edge had dulled. I noticed at first in the way the store looked just before opening. The sun would hit the front window differently, casting long streaks of gold across the floorboards. Dust floated in the beams like something sacred. I didn't rush to sweep it. There's something beautiful about the ordinary when it's finally yours. Clara had started coming by 3 times a week. No official schedule, just a rhythm we fell into. Sometimes she helped. Sometimes she rid. Sometimes she sat in silence and watched the world through the glass. I let her. One afternoon she asked if she could bring a friend to the shop. She's quiet, Clara said. Bit odd, but I think she'd like it here. I nodded. Odd's a good sign, so the girl came. Emma, tall and thin and dressed in layers that didn't quite match. She walked the shop slowly, never spoke unless spoken to. But when she saw the old violin in the back case, her whole posture shifted. That's not just decorative, she said. No, I replied, but it hasn't been tuned in years. Emma asked if she could hold it. I unlocked the case. She didn't play it, just held it like a memory, then handed it back. I hope someone plays it again someday, she said and left. I didn't sell the violin, but I moved it to the front display. Some things need to be seen, even if they stay silent. That night, I opened Emily's letter again. Not because I missed her, not even out of curiosity, but because I wanted to see if it still made me ache. It didn't. It read like something complete. A chapter, not a cliffhanger. I placed it back in the drawer and went to the kitchen where the kettle had started to hum. Tea had become my ritual, not for comfort, for clarity. I took it to the back porch, wrapped myself in the old knitted shawl I hadn't worn since Thomas died. The air bit at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. From across the yard, I could hear the neighbor's wind chime, tiny, irregular. It didn't match the breeze, and that made me like it more. Sometimes music has to be a little off, to be honest. The next morning I took a walk before opening the store. It wasn't a long walk, just up the hill to the old community garden, where nothing was blooming yet. The beds were bare, and someone had left a child's glove frozen to a fence post, but the earth smelled awake. I stopped by the bench near the roses, sat for a moment, closed my eyes. I didn't think about Emily. I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about what I hadn't noticed before. The way snow sounds when it melts, the shape of frost on metal, the quiet certainty of morning. That was enough. When I got back, the bell over the door rang before I could even hang up my coat. Paul, not in a suit this time, just jeans, sweater, the same uncertain posture I'd seen at the wedding. He took off his cap, held it in both hands. "May I?" I nodded toward the chairs near the window. "If you're here to sell insurance, I'll need stronger tea." He smiled a little. He sat, looked around. "This place is," he started, then stopped. "Odd," I offered. "No, real. That's what Emily called it. Too real." That made me laugh just once. "Quiet." She said you read her letter. He added. "I did." "She didn't expect you to respond." "I didn't." He nodded. "She's not sure what to do with that." "That's not my problem," I said gently. "No," he agreed. "It's not." He looked down at his hands. "She's in therapy now," he said. "For the first time." I didn't reply. "She's scared," he added. "That she broke something she can't fix. She probably did." He didn't defend her. I appreciated that. But I continued, "It was never about fixing." "What was it about?" "Letting go of the idea that I'm the one who has to." He sat with that for a while. Then he reached into his coat pocket and took out a folded paper. "She wrote again," he said. "Didn't know if she should send it. I told her I'd bring it." He placed it on the table between us. "I won't read it now," I said. "I know." We sat for another moment. "I like Clara," he said, standing. "She's not afraid to ask hard questions," I replied. "Neither are you." He tipped his head and left. The letter stayed on the table all afternoon. I didn't touch it. When Clara came by, she didn't ask about it. She just swept the floor badly and made tea, and I let her. The snow was melting again. In the back room, the music box finally gave out one full crooked note, off-key but alive. The first daffodil bloomed outside the shop in mid-March, just one low to the ground, pushing up stubbornly through last year's frostbitten soil. Yellow, small, imperfect, but unmistakably alive. Clara spotted it first. "There," she said, crouching beside the little garden bed by the curb. "Proof we survived." I looked down at it. "You say that every year." "This is my first spring with you," she replied. "I'm allowed to be dramatic." I smiled. "It suits you." We left it unpicked. Inside the shop, we'd started reorganizing the back wall, moving out the heavier winter items, replacing them with lighter woods, ceramics, painted tins, things that caught the light a little easier. It didn't matter if they sold right away. They changed the feel of the space. Some days the shop was quiet, others not a single customer walked in. But we still opened, still dusted, still played the same scratched jazz record when the afternoon light hit just right. "I think I want to study history," Clara said one Thursday, her voice barely louder than the hum of the radiator. "Good choice," I said without looking up from the shelf. "You don't think it's useless?" I shrugged. "Anything can be useless if you treat it like decoration." She thought about that, then said, "You'd make a good teacher." "I already was." She blinked. "You taught." I nodded. "For 3 years before the shop, before the mortgage, before Emily." "Why you stop?" "Because the world needed other things from me." Clara was quiet a long time. "I'm glad you're still here," she said eventually. "I'm not sure I ever left." Later that day, Lynn came by. She didn't stay long, just enough to bring cinnamon scones from the bakery near her apartment and comment on the new display in the front window. "You've got that old scale out again," she said. It felt like the right time. Balance and all, something like that. She sat just long enough for one cup of tea, then stood to leave. "Emily's been asking about you," she said casually. "To me? I mean, I didn't say anything." "Good, she seems softer." "So does granite after enough rain," I said. Lynn smirked. "True," then more gently. "I think she's trying." "I think trying is between her and herself now." She didn't argue, just touched my hand briefly, then let herself out. I didn't open the second letter Emily had sent. Not yet. It still sat in the drawer with the first one unread intact. I wasn't afraid of it. I just didn't need it yet. That evening, as I closed up shop, I stood by the front window and watched the street. Children were playing down the block, riding bikes too fast, shouting names I didn't recognize. One girl had a pink helmet and a basket full of plastic flowers. She reminded me of Emily at that age. And yet I didn't ache, not anymore. That kind of memory used to sting. The kind where your body remembers before your mind does. But now it just sat beside me like an old neighbor who still waved even if we no longer shared the same porch. Back home I made soup, not because anyone was coming, just because it was cold out and I wanted to feed myself well. I sliced carrots, measured lentils, let things simmer the long way. No shortcuts, no rushing. As it cooked, I sat in the kitchen and leafed through a notebook Clara had left behind. Sketches of the shop, little notes about customers, a list of things I want to ask Nora but don't know how. The first item on the list, did you ever want to run away? The second, what would you have done if Emily stayed soft? The third, do you believe in second chances or just better endings? I closed the notebook gently and put it back where she'd left it. Maybe I'd answer her one day. Or maybe she'd find her own answers the way I had. Not all at once, not loudly, but in the slow unfolding of days where nothing dramatic happens. And yet everything shifts. That night I slept with the window cracked just slightly. The air smelled like soil and something green. And for the first time in years I didn't dream of being somewhere else. I dreamed of here. April came in like an apology. The rain softened everything. The streets, the sky, even people's voices. Strangers spoke more gently when their coats were damp. The world felt hushed, like it had been reminded of its own fragility. Clara brought in tulips for the front window. They didn't match the rest of the shop. Too new, too bright. But that was the point. She arranged them in a chipped blue pitcher and stepped back to admire them. They don't last long, she said. Nothing good does. She turned to me. That's depressing. That's true. She laughed. You should paint that on the door. That afternoon, I found myself sitting in the back room holding the second letter. I hadn't planned to open it, but something about the way the two lips leaned toward the light made me feel like I didn't have to protect my silence anymore. So I read. It wasn't long. Mom, I've been going to therapy. Not because anyone made me, because I got tired of hearing myself repeat things that didn't feel true anymore. One thing my therapist asked, what version of yourself are you trying to keep alive? It made me stop because I realized I've been carrying this story. That you were cold, that you held me back, that I had to move past you to become who I am. But when I say it out loud, it feels thin, like tissue paper. The truth is, I don't know who I'd be without you. I just didn't know how to hold that truth and still be angry. So, I chose anger because it felt easier to manage. I want to try again. Not from scratch. Not pretending we didn't hurt each other. Just from now, I understand if you don't. But I'll keep writing whether you answer or not because I still want you to know me. Emily, I set the letter down. I didn't cry again. The tears had stopped being the point. I just sat there and felt the strange stillness of hearing your own story rewritten by someone else. I didn't feel obligated to respond, but I didn't feel closed off either. The next day I wrote a card, just a simple one, a cream square with a small bird in the corner. Inside I wrote, you were always seen. You just forgot to look back. Mom, no address, no stamp. I placed it in a drawer. Maybe I'd send it one day, maybe I wouldn't. Later that week, Lynn and I sat on the bench behind the store where the magnolia tree had started to bloom in fat, pale blossoms. She handed me a biscuit from the bakery and unwrapped her own with the kind of grace that comes from decades of carrying herself with purpose. You look softer, she said, not looking at me. I feel finished, I replied. She nodded. That's better than healed. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then she said, you think you'll ever open that door again? I don't know. Would it be so bad if you didn't? No, I said. Not bad, just different. We watched the petals drift down one by one, without ceremony. Behind us, Clara was humming to herself inside the shop. I recognized the tune, a broken version of the music box song. She'd been trying to recreate it on the old piano someone had donated last month. It still sounded like something finding its way home. That night, I cooked dinner for myself and ate it by the window. No one was coming, no occasion, just a good plate of roasted potatoes and spinach, a glass of red wine I'd been saving for no reason. The kind of meal you make when you no longer need to prove anything. Outside, the air smelled of wet earth and soft change. I went to bed early, and when I woke, I didn't reach for memory. I reached for the day. May arrived like a whisper. Not loud, not showy, just here. The mornings were warmer now, and the tulips in the front window had given way to lilacs Clara brought in from a bush behind her school. She'd cut them herself, wrapped the stems in wet paper towels, and carried them across town like something fragile she wasn't ready to lose. She set them in a tall jar near the counter. Too much, she asked. I said just enough. We didn't talk much that day. The kind of silence we shared had its own language. She reorganized the postcards. I dusted the shelves. The doorbell rang now and then, a customer here and there. Most didn't buy and I didn't mind. They lingered and that was enough. After she left, I sat at the back table with a cup of tea and reread the card I'd written to Emily, the one I hadn't sent. The words still felt true, but I didn't feel the need to send them anymore. Not out of pride, not out of punishment. I simply didn't need to be understood in the old way. Some bonds don't get mended. They grow different roots further apart, and that's not always failure. Sometimes it's what keeps both trees standing. I slid the card back into the drawer gently. The music box played now. Not a full song, not perfectly, but enough. A few crooked notes that sounded like breath, like effort, like something trying again after forgetting how I wound it once and let it sing to the empty room. That evening, Lynn joined me on the back porch. She brought lemon cake and 2 forks. "You ever miss being needed?" she asked. I took a moment. "No," I said. "But I miss thinking I had to be." She nodded. "That's the hardest thing to unlearn." We watched the sky turn that soft kind of blue that only comes in spring. The blue that looks like it's been rinsed clean. I thought of all the things I hadn't said to Emily. Not out of cruelty, just out of peace. I didn't need to remind her who I was. I knew who I was. That was the difference. Later that week, Clara brought a form from school. Volunteer mentoring. She said, "You don't have to, but I think some of the girls would like you." "Why me?" "Because you don't talk down, you don't flinch, and you don't pretend things didn't hurt." I looked at the form. It was simple enough. "I'll come," I said. "If they'll have me," she grinned. "They'll have you." I signed my name. Not to be useful, not to be needed, just because I wanted to. In early June, Emily came to the store. No letter first, no warning, just her. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't wear makeup. She looked like someone who'd had to convince herself at every step not to turn back. Clara was in the back, so it was just the 2 of us in the front room. She said, "Hi." She looked around. "It's smaller than I remembered. You were smaller when you left." We stood there, time moving slowly between us. "I've been writing," she said. "I know." I didn't expect anything back. I didn't have anything to send. She nodded. "That's okay." We didn't hug. She didn't cry. She walked slowly through the store, touched nothing, then turned to leave. But before she opened the door, she looked at me and said, "I never forgot you. I just got tired of being the person you believed I was." "I understand," I said. I got tired of trying to hold her together. She nodded once. "That's fair." Then she left. No promises, no scenes, just presence. Sometimes that's the most anyone can offer, and sometimes that's more than enough. Later, I sat with Clara at the back table. She was eating a plum juice running down her wrist, laughing at something she'd read. I looked at her and thought, this is the shape of the rest of my life. Not fixing, not waiting, just choosing what I let in, choosing what I give, choosing who gets to see the soft places and not mistake them for weakness. I don't need to be remembered as the mother who stayed quiet or the woman who forgave too much. I'd rather be remembered as the one who returned to herself slowly, stubbornly, and without apology. If you've ever been forgotten, erased, or asked to shrink in someone else's light, I hope you take this as permission. You're allowed to return, you're allowed to grow again, and you're allowed to be enough, even if they never say it. If this story meant something to you, share it. Let someone else remember who they are. Quiet power matters too.